From there, as I intervene and then reevaluate the outcomes, that gives me the next set of information. So I've now updated my representations as to what is in front of me. Then I can decide, okay, do I need to add another test at this point? Because I used to do 77 of them. So I'm very familiar with what I have available.
Good morning. Happy Tuesday. I have NeuroCoffee in hand and it is perfect. All right. A busy Tuesday, as usual. Quick reminder, if you're not on ifastuniversity.com, I suggest you go there. We had a terrific call yesterday. It was pure fun for me, just answering questions and digging a little bit deeper into some of the model. So we had a great time. Talked hypertrophy, which is unusual, which is always a good time. Anyway, leading into today's Q&A. This was a great conversation that I had with Matthew, a little bit different than typical. We talked a lot about data collection and assessment tests and what assessments would be valuable. And back in the olden days before you were born, I used to do 77 tests, mainly because I didn't know what was going to be valuable to me. And then we whittled away, and now we have like a foundational representation of about 13 tests that I do on everyone, and then the test battery would expand from there as needed. But Matthew's working through some stuff in regards to his data collection. We talked about how to manage uncertainty. I wrote a couple of notes down here. Understanding the unknown unknowns, how to manage your cognitive bias. This is all really important in things as you evolve as a coach. One of the main problems that I think people run into, especially the younger coaches, is they think that there's a cookbook somewhere that has the answers in it. And then you go there and then you read that and then you know everything, and that's not how it works. You need to gain experience. It is best to do it under the guidance of a mentor if you can do that. So again, Matthew, thank you so much. I enjoyed this call immensely. I wish we could have continued on. If you would like to participate in a 15-minute consultation, please go to askbillhartman@gmail.com, askbillhartman@gmail.com, put 15-minute consultation in the subject line, and we will arrange that at our mutual convenience. Everybody have an outstanding Tuesday, and I will see you tomorrow.
All right. We are recording. Clock has started. Matthew, what is your question?
So the main question I have for you in regards to biomechanics in your model, and I'm fairly new to your model in general, but the main thing I want to understand is the data that I should be focused on, because at the stage that I'm at right now, I've been into the strength and conditioning world for a while. You know, I started training when I was 9, but even with all those years of picking up things and gathering information, I haven't had any organized information to draw back on.
Yeah.
And I think that even though I might not be able to fully comprehend the data that I'm gathering at this point, I know that in the future, there may be data that will be valuable to me. And if I have it backlogged, then I can kind of reference it and use it to further understand the model as it evolves. Right. So as of now, I have some things like pressure mapping, like infrared thermography, different things like that, videoing, running gait and walking gait. And I think those things will be very useful, but I'm just wondering how useful they may be, or how useful they may be in the future, or if I'm on the wrong kind of.
Okay. Tell you a quick story. Okay. So when we first opened iFast, my assessment on everybody that walked in the door was comprised of 77 different tests. Okay. And I was really good, so I could smoke through that thing in about 25 minutes. Okay.
Yeah.
The reason I did that is because I didn't know what was going to be important.
Yeah.
And so I measured a ton of stuff and I documented it over and over and over again. And then you go through this process of evolution. So this was like almost 14 years ago now. And you learn stuff, you drop stuff out of your system, you bring it back in, you take it out, and then now my assessment process is 13 tests. Okay.
Yeah.
And that'd be like the baseline representation. So everybody that would walk in my door, so comes into my purple room, because we do the gym assessments a little bit differently, but anybody that comes into my room, I do 13 tests as the foundation. So that's the baseline representation that I need to make my first good decision.
Okay.
Okay. So what you're doing by just accumulating data right now is actually the right way to do it. Like not knowing, but just getting stuff. And that'll change. Like there'll be certain things you go, I'm going to start measuring this, or it's like, I'm not seeing the value in this. Okay. And so it'll evolve sort of organically as you start making decisions, because you'll find that like there's certain tests that you just don't need every time. And then there's other ones that are kind of really foundational, So when I talk about archetypes and things like that, like narrows versus wides, the reason that those exist is because I constructed those so I would have a frame of reference to start from, because everybody's a little idiosyncratic in their physical structure, but they're going to create biases and things like that. So I take the two extremes, and everybody's between those two extremes somewhere. And that's what I'm measuring. So that's my foundational representation. From there, as I intervene and then reevaluate the outcomes, that gives me the next set of information. So I've now updated my representations as to what is in front of me. Then I can decide, okay, do I need to add another test at this point? Because I used to do 77 of them. So I'm very familiar with what I have available. I just don't need them every time. But sometimes I got to look at a wrist. Sometimes I got to look at an elbow. Those are not part of my standard representation anymore, because I realize that I don't need that information right away to get started. Because again, I've got time constraints, et cetera, every time I'm working with somebody, right? It doesn't mean that they're not useful. It just means that they're not useful every time. And so you're going to go through the same process most likely. Is like you're measuring all of this stuff, and it's like, okay, is there something else that gives me similar information or even the same information without me having to do this really complex number of tests or time-consuming tests or whatever it may be? So I would love to say, do this, do this, do this, but I don't know what's going to be meaningful to you. Right? I think you're going to discover that on your own with time, because again, the stuff that's meaningful to me comes from my representation and the model that I use and teach. The stuff that's going to make sense to you, it's like your perspective is different from mine. Now you can still use elements of my model to help you move in a specific direction. But if you have the capacity to measure some stuff, like I don't measure HRV directly. I mean, we've actually done that in the past. We actually did measure it in real time. So, but now I have a representation. It's like, so when I see people with this combination of movement capabilities, I kind of know what their HRV bias is going to be. I kind of know where they're going to be, right? And so I'm making these associations, and that's kind of how you do stuff. Because think about this: people are changing constantly.
Yeah.
Right? In all levels. And so again, the meaningfulness of something at one point in time might not have the power that it does in other situations. Like I said, if I get somebody that comes in with, an elbow wrist problem, it's like, I still need to look at the foundational representations, because that's my starting point anyway. Then I sort of work my way out into the extremity. And now I'm taking, 6 more of those 77 tests that I did 100 million years ago. And then I'm starting to say, oh, that's what this meant a long time ago, because I still have that representation. So I go back and I say, here's when I did the 77 tests. Whenever I saw an elbow that looked like this, I always had this measure and this measure in a specific representation too. You see how it starts to fit together?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah. So again, I think that what you do is continue on the path that you're on and saying, I don't know what to measure. I'm going to measure as many things as I can within reason that allow me to, to make good first decisions. And then you will evolve your own foundational representation, and you'll say, this test means a lot to me. This test means a lot to me. This test means a lot to me, to get me started.
Okay.
And then you say, okay, so you think about like a target. It's like you got the center of the target, and like that's the stuff that you got to measure on everybody because everybody's human, right? And then you go, okay, so I started there and I get this representation. Now I need to look a little bit farther out and I say, okay, what's this next level of influence?
Yeah.
Right? And then the next level of influence, and then the next level of influence. And you can look at this as a training process. I get this foundational movement representation. What if I superimpose these activities on top of that? What happens? What about developing, endurance capabilities or force production? It's like all of those are layers on top of your initial, what I would consider my archetypical representations. Right, all of those things become influences as they gain importance for me. But whether I have an NBA basketball player in or a Gen Pop client that comes in, I start with the foundational representation because that's sort of like the meat and potatoes of who they are. Right. And so that gives me my best starting conditions, because I know that from my experience over the last decade and a half is that some of this peripheral stuff is a byproduct of where they started. And so I got to get that first. But I'm not going to tell you like you only need to do this, this, and this, because I think that if you stay on the path that you're on, I think it's going to be that much more meaningful to you, because you're going to be the guy that makes the decision as to what's meaningful, what you can eliminate now. Don't forget about it because you might need it, right? It's like I think you're on point with your process, because I like that a lot, because I'm biased because I think that's what I did. It's like I just started measuring everything first and go, okay, what do I need? What do I not need right now?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that solidifies it. Yeah, just like anything, walk through the fire, and in the end you'll have your answer.
And you'll learn, number one, because you're doing the discovery. It will be infinitely more meaningful to you. It will accelerate your ability to consolidate your understanding. So instead of going to somebody and going, "Tell me what I need to know," you're going to see. You see what I mean? It's like what you need to do. What you want to do is you want to discover as much of this. Like, it doesn't mean you can't listen to me or somebody else and not make that meaningful, but you got to bring it into your context, right? From your understanding in your environment, right? Because that's what's most meaningful to you. And then, like I said, as you discover this, dude, it locks stuff in so much more effectively than somebody trying to hand you a cookbook and then you flipping through and going, oh, if then. It's like you have your own management system, right? Your own depth of understanding. And then, and that's powerful. That's really powerful, because it's not about being told what to do. It's like, I've discovered this, and you might discover things that are already known. That's okay too, right? Yeah. The thing about it is, it's like, it's the attachment that you have made to this information through your own toil. That's where the power lies. Okay. Yeah. Always willing to help you. Okay. I'm always willing to help you. Okay. With questions and such, but I also encourage you to stay on the path that you're on, because it's going to be sucky. It's going to be struggle. You're going to sit and you're just going to be staring at things. You're going to go, I have no idea what this means. I have no idea what this means. And then eventually something's going to flip and you're going to go, oh, and then this whole cascade of things comes to you and you go, oh, that's what this meant because of this, because of this, because of this. Yes. Yeah, for sure. That's exactly probably the answer that I was looking for, but probably thought I might've needed something else, but that's what I need probably. See, I think you're in a position that a lot of people sort of like they kind of go one way or another. They sort of latch onto something, or they allow themselves to discover. And I think I'm not negating the fact that you don't need help sometimes. We all do. Getting some foundation of any kind, like I don't deter people from doing any of that, right? Yeah. But eventually at some point in time, you got to start going, I got to find my way. I got to see this from my perspective. You can't see what I see. Mm-hmm. I can teach you what I think I know, but you're ultimately going to see it through your own eyes. Yeah, my biases are going to influence what I get. Dude, you want to talk about bias? You should live in my head. It's not pretty.
Yeah.
but
No,
but the fact that you recognize that your bias exists is helpful. But you will always be challenged. You will always be challenged to not move in that direction. It's like you constantly challenge yourself against, like, this is what I think. Why do I think it? What are the alternatives? And again, I think that when you look at your data collection, that's what's going to be really, really helpful, because you're always going to have that other piece of information, whether you use it now or 5 years from now.
Mhm.
You know, I don't know. I don't know. Just be as efficient as you can, right?
Mhm.
And then one logical step at a time in regards to your process. I think I really like what you're doing. I really like what you're doing.
Okay, well, I appreciate that. And I guess, as you know, it's kind of the Dunning-Kruger effect. As you get, more competent, you realize you have less influence than you think, and you understand you have, less interventions available than you think, because there's so many factors coming in, right? There's so many factors. And I guess now I'm at that period where I've hit that low point where I'm like, there's so many factors that are influencing this person, and I don't know which ones are positive, which ones are negative. But as time goes on, I'll recuperate that confidence,
right,
and start to be able. And yeah, that, I guess that ties in.
It's funny. It's funny. We were talking about. I think I actually posted on Instagram today. I was talking about uncertainty. So I got a question. She's actually one of our interns, and she's got some experience under her belt, but she's still young. And so she asked a question about that, and we talked about how you manage the uncertainty. And so a lot of this comes from what you're talking about right now, is that eventually you're going to have to recognize the fact that, think about this, all the things that you do know, consider all the things that you don't even know exist. The unknowns, the unknown unknowns, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, there's so much stuff that we just like, and then we give credit where we think it is, right? But ultimately, what we're doing is we're making associations, and we're managing probabilities, right? You always have a potential favorable response, and you always, and again, and there's think about this. It's like there's not even just like the good and the bad. There is like all variations in between. So you could be just on the slight side of good, and you're like, maybe that's good enough for right now, but it's not the best you could have done. What else could you have done? And so what I also challenge people to do is rely on your process. And so no matter what the outcome is, so let's just say that you intervene with somebody based on the information that you have, and a good thing happens. Is that the best thing that could have happened, or is it just a good thing? And it's like, what else could I have done? What else could have been a factor here that I didn't even consider? It's like when you ask yourself those really, really hard questions, and that's where you really start to see what your opportunities are. It's like, what else could I have done? Like that question alone, it's like, what else could I have done to get even better? So maybe it's this, maybe it's that. So maybe the next time you see a similar scenario and you start to intervene in the same way, you go, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to experiment here, and I'm going to tweak this just a little bit to do something else. And then maybe it's an even better result. And now you add that to your updated information. And then that's how you evolve as a trainer or a coach or whatever you may be. You see it?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's really powerful. By the way, you need to read a book or two. I'm looking at your bookshelf behind you, Bob.
That's my problem. There's so much information coming in, and to organize it, it's so, especially when you're limited on time. As I've grown up, the more responsibility, the harder it is to organize this information in meaningful ways, and it just builds up almost.
It is. Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
How are you organizing it right now? Like how do you capture the information?
Well, a lot of it is to do with writing. So I just pretend whatever the subject is, I go through the process of writing a book for myself and say, okay, if I was 15 years old or 20 years old, how would I try to display this information to myself in the most meaningful way, in a categorized way, so I can approach it from, whatever angle and still wind up with meaningful results or meaningful information.
Right. Have you read Richard Feynman?
Yeah, surely you're joking. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So that's, you sound like him.
Okay.
Which is a good
that's a huge, that's probably the best compliment.
Well, that's a good thing. That's a compliment. It's like, because you think of a guy that was like, what arguably the second smartest physicist of the 20th century, right? Arguably. And then you think about his process and the way that he taught and the way that he recommended that you understand things. You're like I said, love your process. I love your process. I love where you're at. Keep going. And then if you need help, you let me know. Okay.
I will in the future for sure.
Awesome. All right, man. Great to talk to you. I got to run to my next call. Okay.
Thanks a lot, Bill.